Near, I see the light. Oh.
Coming up, I take a roadie run through Gears of War.
John cowers behind waist-high objects as he fires off his 5 top cover shooters.
Everyone gets killed by the time limit. That's what real life is.
Aoife enters the testosterone as she explores gaming's manliest menfolk.
Now bear with me here, because this could blow your mind.
And we upgrade our experts for a new generation as they debate the merits of remasters.
Well, they gave you all the game, made it actually look better, didn't ruin the gameplay, and it was a bargain.
Get your chainsaw bayonets revved up for this week's Video Game Nation. Despite being the most popular Xbox exclusive franchise outside of Halo, Gears of War has something of an image problem.
With its cast of absurdly bulky, testosterone-charged meatheads and bro-tacular dialogue, some have dismissed it as a brainless blaster that only serves to reinforce the notion that gaming is an artless, gratuitous waste of everyone's time.
And while there's no denying that it certainly looks like the sort of game dreamt up by a hormonal 13-year-old boy in Middle America, the reality is, like Gears of War villains The Locust, there's a lot more going on under the surface.
Once intended to be a multiplayer-focused game that would have resembled a dystopian sci-fi take on Battlefield, Gears of War transformed when its creators played the mighty Resident Evil 4 and Namco's fairly obscure father of the cover shooter, Killswitch. What emerged was a brawny, campaign-driven co-op blaster that was as surprisingly brainy as it was depressingly brown.
That intelligence might not be evident in the plot, but it's certainly there in the game design.
The influence of Resident Evil 4 can be felt in its limited but universally satisfying arsenal. From the default Lancer, a full-auto rifle with a bonus chainsaw, to the explosive torque bow, there's a finely tuned heft and kick to each creatively designed weapon that makes them endlessly enjoyable to wield. Most ingenious of all, though, is the active reload system, a simple minigame that adds an extra layer of strategy and skill to keeping your ammo both topped up and powered up.
And even that drab visual style is deliberate, an attempt by Epic to depict what it describes as destroyed beauty. It's a term that many have also applied to my face.
The world of Serra was, at one point, something akin to ancient Rome or Greece at their cultural peak, and when we first arrived, some 14 years after Emergence or E-Day, we see its once grand art and architecture reduced to high-quality rubble. This is a story that sees humanity at its lowest ebb, and the faded palette echoes that pervading melancholy.
With all this in mind, it's no wonder that Gears of War was instrumental in selling a heap of Xbox 360s.
I can't say it tempted me to buy a 360, but it did tempt friends of mine. A lot of my friends really loved Gears of War, but I guess there was something about the really heavy machismo of it all that didn't really appeal to me.
No, mainly because I was still transfixed by the blue LED on the front of my PlayStation 2. I think I lost quite a few months just staring at it, because, you know, it's the future.
The game that tempted me to buy the 360 was Red Dead Redemption. So Gears of War, it was alluring from a PC gamer perspective. It wasn't enough to make me take the plunge.
It didn't tempt me to buy one, but it did tempt me to convince my old boss to give me one when he made me redundant. That is a true story. So I managed to twist someone's arm and get one for free. Thank you, Jan.
You gotta be kidding me.
It's almost certain that the majority of Gears detractors haven't had the pleasure of playing it cooperatively.
Much like the unfairly maligned Resident Evil 5, Gears games are far more entertaining when you've got a buddy watching your backside or backside. It's fair to say that a number of real-life bromances, or romances, have developed off the back of a timely revival or a well-executed flank. Gears' camaraderie was so well developed that the single player felt distinctly lonely without it.
This was further explored in the game's divisive multiplayer, which used the game's deliberate pace to emphasize a greater sense of teamwork than, say, the likes of Call of Duty or Halo. Sadly, the series has traditionally been plagued by many technical issues that have prevented it from reaching the same heights as its peers.
Still, that didn't prevent Gears from single-handedly inspiring a raft of imitators and innovators, including Vanquish, Binary Domain, Uncharted, Spec Ops: The Line, and Army of Two. It might not be the first cover shooter, but it's undoubtedly the most influential.
With a true fourth installment scheduled for release at the end of 2016, Microsoft has opted to fill the Gears gap with a remastered, so-called Ultimate Edition of the game that started it all.
Co-developed by new franchise overseers The Coalition and UK devs Splash Damage, the Ultimate Edition doesn't make any serious fundamental changes, instead focusing on jazzed-up graphics and minor control refinements. It's a more convincing upgrade than some recent purported remasters, but even so, are slightly prettier visuals enough to warrant investing in something you already played 10 years ago?
What I want from a video game remastering is not too much mucking about. You know, don't mess with the mechanics too much or even the environments. Just make it look nicer and maybe play, you know, slightly smoother. That's it. It's not difficult.
Like, if they've really taken a game I loved and really put a lot of effort into recrafting it so it looks nice and feels like the experience I had originally, because you can play some older games now and be like, ugh, that looks weird.
I feel like, you know, a good remastered game is like a good Blu-ray or a good DVD box. So you've got to have all that extra stuff for the fans to really experience and enjoy.
I want to say that it's a chance to play a game that I never had the chance to play like on the previous generation, but in the best possible version. But the only one I've ever bought is Grand Theft Auto 5, which I then hardly ever played because it was, you know, it's basically the same game. Obviously, I'm an idiot.
Perhaps the true purpose of Gears of War Ultimate Edition isn't to remind fans of the good old days, but rather to allow those who maybe dismissed it the first time around to give it another chance, ideally with a friend, and realise that it's got a lot more going for it than stupidly thick necks and more browns than a chocolate factory. Right, here's John with a list of cover shooters that doesn't include binary domain and is therefore completely invalid.
Hello, television friends. High def, high five. Cover shooters, the absolute point of definition between two generations of gamers. On one hand, the wimpy, whiny, strategic children who cower like mice behind their random blocks of concrete and bulletproof cars, and on the other hand, real adults like me, raised on Doom, who know that no strategy involves ducking or jumping, since both of those things are physically impossible.
Alright, that's not totally true, even if new shooters do play like a school counsellor trying to boost your self-esteem. If you're not getting shot, you'll feel better. Here's a list of 5 games that made crouching a mechanic we'd all be worse without, and some that redefined the art of the safety squat.
Time Crisis was marketed as the first arcade game with a cover system,
since games like Virtua Cop had you point your weapon off screen to reload.
Time Crisis went for a tiny hint of realism with its adrenaline. If you run out of ammo, you're not just going to stand there, so you just drop behind a box to reload. It felt amazing.
The plot's as simple as you expect. The president's daughter has been kidnapped and you have to save her. Your gun is loaded, your jacket is leather, and your name is Richard Miller, because excitement can't last forever.
Your main enemy, of course, was time.
Sitting in cover lost you precious seconds that could be spent shooting people, while clearing each little area bought you more game time. So all those convenient boxes were good for a breather, but then it was back to work or game over.
And you don't play a first-person shooter to get killed by the time limit. Everyone gets killed by the time limit. That's what real life is. The first third-person shooter focused on its cover system, Kill Switch is what happens when you base a shooting game entirely on the idea of not getting shot.
You'll play as Nick Bishop, an amnesiac super soldier under the control of various people as they attempt to start an all-out war. As the game goes on, Bishop runs, jumps, shoots, ducks, and causes utter carnage on his journey of self-discovery, just like any normal teenage girl.
Kill Switch is mostly remembered for the innovations it brought to cover.
And it's exactly the kind of thing I love, peeking out from your cover to open fire, and blind fire, the ability to open fire without peeking out from behind your cover.
The game's press team called it the offensive cover system. Playboy magazine, who really know a thing or two about offensive covers, called it, finally, a shooter for cowards.
And they're both right.
Yeah, Vanquish had a cover system. It just didn't want you to use it.
Redefining the idea of hiding behind an object by removing the ability to hide behind that object, Vanquish took a leaf out of the gospel according to Time Crisis and made hiding a bad idea.
First up, it had gameplay mechanics that rewarded you for braving enemy fire.
The ability to rocket slide from object to object while blasting your enemies was certainly more appealing than just sitting still.
Real life is you sitting still. Video games are you rocket sliding somewhere.
Then, if you sat behind an object too long, your score would start to go down.
I've always found scores funny. Oh no! Not my precious numbers! I can't believe that this way of playing has a lower numerical value than that way of playing. However will I face my family? Come on, aside from original arcade games, it is one of the cheapest ways to get people to keep playing the game. Anyway, next thing. After the James Bond movies went from fanciful to grim, it only made sense that somebody go back to the most famous Bond game and replace everything. No, wait, hold on a minute. Keep the title, keep the story, but replace all of the characters with the grit and griminess of the Daniel Craig films and pretend that Pierce Brosnan never existed. Except that makes no sense because James Bond was a creation of the Cold War, and this is a weirdly Stalinist thing to do.
How do you reboot a classic? Well, you release it on the Wii, a console primarily famous for the novelty of its motion controller. Obviously they could have made a new game, but why bother? Nobody likes new games. They like sequels and old games with new graphics and a different control scheme.
Strange as it was, and not quite as fun as the game that inspired it, GoldenEye Grit Edition gave me a moment that I adored.
The cover system isn't complicated, but you can peer out from behind your refuge by tilting the nunchuck, which isn't just fun to do, it's fun to say. Tilting the nunchuck. Plus, because it's grim and gritty, you're not the well-dressed one-man army from the N64 original, you're a bloke behind a box getting shot at.
Yep.
It's the first shooter with cover in it at all, and the cover's destructible. And you don't need to poke around the side, you can shoot through the cover, which is a feature no one has. Space Invaders, folks. It's the future. From 37 years ago.
Here ends part 1, but we've got plenty more for you after the break, including the following person saying the following thing, along with other people saying other things. It's all happening here. See you in a 16-bit.
Get it out, 50 quid, done. And that's it. Simple. Money.
Wait, what was that? I thought I heard something. Did you hear that?
Injured again? This itch isn't going to scratch itself.
Welcome back. You rejoin me for part 2 of the show, which might look a lot like part 1, but if you look very closely, you'll notice some subtle visual improvements like this mug. Ooh, didn't have that before, did we? Our experts know plenty about barely noticeable upgrades, which is convenient because this week we've asked them to flap their gums about remastered games.
I think remasters are so popular because they're like sequels, but they're easier to make. Obviously, game publishers are always working on brands, you know, like it's always a case of, you know, people want to buy the latest Call of Duty, they want to buy the latest Assassin's Creed. So a remaster is just a nice, quick and dirty way to just release a game with the right franchise like Resident Evil or Gears of War without having to make a whole new game.
Let's do this.
I couldn't make one, but I get the feeling they're pretty easy. Like, it feels like you just run it through a machine and they sort of walk in and go, right, does it do that thing that will make the people on the internet not shout at us? What, 1080p, 60 frames per second? Yeah, does it do that? Yeah, done, go, get it out, 50 quid, done.
Publishers are lazy, you know, and they know it's much easier to sort of recycle old material than have a new idea, which is why I've been doing the same jokes here for 4 seasons.
Because gamers just cannot let go of the past. Like, they clutch onto it for dear life. And as much as they get super excited about the new things that are coming out, they still do it. They're like looking over there, but like there's one arm just holding on to like some old Mario that they refuse to just leave in the past where it should be.
So it's kind of like a stopgap, and I think it happens in every console generation because it does take the developers that sort of extra 2 years to really get to grips with hardware. So in the meantime, here's some old games that you might not have played or that you really loved on the old machines, just a bit better looking. You know, it makes absolute business sense.
You know what? This isn't that bad.
I think remasters are really coming back into fashion, probably for the wrong reasons. I think it's because backwards compatibility has just been destroyed by the last couple of generations of consoles, which means you can't obviously go back and play the games that you own. So re-release a remastered version of it, brush it up a bit, It can be a bit cynical re-releasing these games, making a lot of extra money, but if they're done well, they're worthwhile purchases.
Everybody underestimated how long it was going to take to make games for the new generation, so they've just dusted off their old ones and tidied them up a bit and whacked them on the shelves because that's cheaper and easier, isn't it?
You are treading on some mighty thin ice here.
I think the remaster of Super Mario 64 on the DS is really interesting. I don't know if it did the original proud, but it is different enough and yet kind of complete enough to make it a worthwhile thing on its own. It was a real attempt to do something, which I wish I'd seen Nintendo do more with the re-releases.
Say the Halo Master Chief Collection, well, despite the online being crazily broken, like it just didn't work. Other than that though, it absolutely did it proud, because in a way, that kind of recreated the original experience of playing Halo multiplayer, because you just had to do like local lobbies with just you and your mates. You had to do back in the day. Plus that Halo 2 reworking that they did, it's beautiful. There's new cutscenes and everything, tons of fun.
I really enjoyed Grand Theft Auto on PS4 and Xbox One because it didn't just transfer the game as it was. It kind of added the whole first-person perspective as well, which really changed the game in a lot of ways. Like made it more challenging, but also more interesting in places. Made you feel more at one with the characters. So it was really interesting. It was almost a comment on Grand Theft Auto 5, you know, the remake. It was almost like you're seeing it in a completely different way and learning about the characters, learning about the missions. That was really interesting. They really obviously thought about what they could add to it without obviously having to spend $1 billion on, you know, making whole new levels.
I think the Metal Gear Solid collection on PS3 was just amazing, because I'd never played Metal Gear Solid 3 when it first came around, and it gave me the chance to experience that in HD with much better controls, much better camera angles. It delivered that game to a generation of gamers who perhaps had missed it the first time around, and it is, for many players, the best Metal Gear Solid game in the series.
Super Street Fighter 2 HD Remix. That was everything that was good about the original game, but with a lovely, fresh look to it, and unlike a lot of the other ones, they didn't charge full price for it. So that was wonderful. They gave you all the game, made it actually look better, didn't ruin the gameplay, and it was a bargain.
It's actually been done before. I'd really love to see someone go back and remaster all the original Tony Hawk's games and not do a terrible job of it.
Shenmue 1 and 2. And honestly, I don't want them to do anything. In fact, I actively don't want them to do anything. Don't even make it HD. Don't even make it HD. I want it to be 4x3, I want it to look fuzzy, and I want it to be terrible, because that's what Shenmue is, and that's what I love. So just release them again. Plus there's the Kickstarter now, so Shenmue.
I would love to see a remastered version of New Zealand Story on the Amiga, and I just want it to be like, I don't want any post-apocalyptic sort of environments, I don't want any extra weapons or anything like that. I just want to be a little yellow chicken running around New Zealand jumping in the mouth of a whale in high definition.
Dizzy the Egg. I would like all of Dizzy the Egg remastered in HD on my PS4, please. That would be amazing, but with save states, obviously, because I don't want to have to do the whole thing again if I misjudge a ridiculously precise jump.
I've been doing a bit of thinking recently, and I think I've spotted a trend in video game protagonists. Now bear with me here, because this could blow your mind. But it seems like most video game characters have facial hair. Nah, it's not that. Although that does kind of tie into the current trend making all our games look a bit samey. What do the likes of Marcus Phoenix, Nathan Drake, Mail Shepard, Solid Snake, Chris Redfield, Alan Wake, Dante, Sam Fisher, Agent 47, Garrett, Cole McGrath, Leon S. Kennedy, Link, and countless others have in common? And yeah, some of those might be great characters, but they're all white men with sort of similar haircuts. And that's starting to get very boring. So many of these characters share such similar personality traits, or lack thereof, that it's gotten to the point where these men become avatars, blank spaces for the player to inhabit, rather than actual characters with motivations and quirks of their own. And that's just lazy scripting. You don't even have to make a character talk to make them great. Take Gordon Freeman, for example. He doesn't speak once during Half-Life 1 and 2, but there are enough touches in his surroundings and in how NPCs interact with him that he always makes the top of best gaming character lists of all time. Now, of course we shouldn't get rid of the white male protagonist altogether. So many characters that fit that mold already have been great. But as so many games set out to focus on story, it's gotten to a point where the white male protagonist becomes the default choice for absolutely no reason at all. And that's just boring. Many people play games to escape their own reality and to walk in footsteps they wouldn't be able to otherwise. So why not walk, or more likely run, in as many different kinds of footsteps as possible? Loads of games are wising up to this fact, and it's amazing how big a difference a fresh change in perspective can make. Would Telltale's The Walking Dead have been half as interesting if it hadn't starred an African-American man and a little girl? How about how important Adeline's background is to her character and even the gameplay in Assassin's Creed Liberation? And how AJ Gale's mixed race heritage plays into the plot of Far Cry 4. And Don't Know It's Life is Strange has been a huge surprise hit because it spoke directly to an audience that regularly gets ignored by games: teenage girls. That change in perspective can make all the difference to so much more than just the face you have to look at for the majority of a game's runtime. So big beefy soldier types are preferable for military shooters. That makes sense, although there's no reason the characters can't have a wealth of different cultural backgrounds. But when it comes to action-adventure titles or exploration titles or even survival horror games, a gaming protagonist could literally be anyone. And that sounds interesting. A big strong guy could fight his way out of most situations, sure, but if you're playing as a teenage girl with no guns or composite bows, you've got to be smarter, and developers have got to be smarter in coming up with ways to keep you interested. A hyper-competent, ultra-confident character has the potential to be very dull. If a game wants to focus on story or even just a change up to traditional gameplay, then a flawed protagonist is infinitely more interesting. And it's understandable that games have been wary about diversification in the past. People generally tend to feel more comfortable writing about what they know, and over the years games were made by men, most of them white, for men, again a lot of them white. And it was perhaps out of fear of offending anyone as much as anything else that they didn't want to write about anyone else. What if they didn't do that character justice? What if they played up to a stereotype unwittingly? In their minds it was probably best to just stick to what they knew. But now we have development teams of all different sizes and backgrounds working on games, and many games, regardless of their budget or scope, can go on to be huge successes thanks to online fan support. It's really exciting. People often say they don't care what a character looks like as long as they tell a good story, and that's a great point. But often, how a character looks in games is kind of a lazy shorthand for how they act. And we already have a lot of angry white dudes who scowl because they lost their family in tragic circumstances. Isn't that right, Kratos, Isaac Clarke, John Marston and Max Payne? Yawn. You can make a character's background a part of the story, like in Far Cry 4, or you can make it a simple fact and move on to getting down to good stuff, playing, experiencing and having fun with the game. And instead of looking at a character and saying, why? Maybe more and more, we can try a little, why not?
There's just enough time left for me to check social media and see what comments you've left for us. Let's see. John is the only reason to watch the... No. John is so... No. We want more... No. Ah, right, here we are. The Bat Chef says, watched 5 episodes of VGN with my son and had a great time reminiscing and bonding over our shared love of video games. See, that's a nice message and it didn't hurt anyone's feelings whatsoever. If you'd like to follow Bat Chef's example, simply join us on our official Facebook page or tweet using the hashtag VGN. Until next time, take care and keep on gaming.
The lads, as I'm sure they never get called, are back with more Pointless, Monday night at 7 on Challenge.
I might be a few rungs short of a ladder.